July 14, 1943. The churning waters of the North Atlantic heaved beneath the USS Mason DE-529, a destroyer escort vessel cutting through dense fog banks, its hull slicing through waves under the weight of responsibility. Radio operator first class, James Henry Dunn hunched over his equipment in the cramped communications room, unaware that his next transmission would alter the course of the Atlantic campaign. The Germans believed their Enigma codes unbreakable, their U-boat wolf packs unstoppable. They were about to learn how tragically mistaken they were. Before we dive into this story, drop a quick hi in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. It really helps support the channel. This is the remarkable account of how one man's innovative signal deception strategy would create a phantom Allied fleet, saving countless ships and lives while exposing the profound disconnect between Nazi ideology and the capabilities of those they deemed inferior. The USS Mason slipped through the morning mist, her silhouette barely visible against the grey horizon. She was one of many destroyer escorts tasked with protecting vital supply convoys crossing the Atlantic, floating lifelines carrying food, fuel, ammunition, and hope to a beleaguered Britain. What made the Mason unique wasn't her armament or design, but her crew. She was manned predominantly by black sailors, one of only 2 U.S. Navy vessels with a predominantly African-American crew during World War II. In the radio room, James Dunn adjusted his headphones, his fingers moving with practiced precision across the dials of his equipment. At 24, Dunn had already overcome more obstacles than most men faced in a lifetime. Born in Harlem during the depths of the Great Depression, he had developed a fascination with radio technology through building crystal sets in his tenement apartment. Despite graduating at the top of his technical school class, he'd found doors closed to him until the war created desperate need for skilled technicians. "Anything from Convoy RZ-42?" asked Lieutenant Commander William Blackford, leaning into the cramped space. Dunn straightened in his chair. "Nothing yet, sir. They should be approximately 200 miles northeast of our position. Weather reports indicate heavy fog across their route." Blackford nodded, his expression betraying concern that his words did not. "Keep monitoring. Intelligence suggests increased U-boat activity in this sector." "Yes, sir." Dunn turned back to his equipment as Blackford departed. What the commander hadn't mentioned, what everyone aboard the Mason knew, was that Convoy RZ-42 carried not just supplies, but thousands of troops bound for the European theater. If the Germans found them, the consequences would be devastating. 200 miles away aboard U-427, Oberleutnant Karl Werner studied the plotting table in the submarine's control room. The Type 7C U-boat had been patrolling these waters for 11 days without a single confirmed contact. His crew was growing restless. "Herr Oberleutnant," called Funkmaat Heinrich Braun, the radio operator, "I'm detecting increased Allied radio traffic, encrypted. But the signal patterns suggest convoy movements." Werner moved to the radio station, his interest piqued. "Can you determine direction or distance?" Braun adjusted his equipment. "The signals appear to be coming from grid sector AF7. Signal strength suggests approximately 150 to 200 kilometers. Werner calculated quickly. If the transmission originated from that sector, and if it indeed indicated convoy movement, U-427 could intercept within hours. He turned to his executive officer. "Prepare to alter course. Alert the Wolfpack. We may have found our target." What neither Werner nor Braun realized was that they were detecting transmissions deliberately designed to be found. A carefully orchestrated deception that had begun to unfold aboard the USS Mason. The seed of the plan had been planted 3 days earlier, when Dunn had noticed something peculiar about German detection patterns. Each time Allied vessels transmitted using standard protocols, U-boat attacks followed within 12 to 24 hours. The Germans weren't breaking the encryption. They were tracking the transmission patterns themselves, using direction-finding equipment to triangulate positions. "Permission to speak freely, sir," Dunn had asked Commander Blackford during their meeting in the officer's wardroom. "Go ahead, Dunn." "I believe the Germans are using our transmission patterns to locate our convoys, sir. Not the content, but the signals themselves. Frequency, duration, transmission schedule. They're tracking our radio fingerprints." Blackford considered this. That's consistent with recent intelligence. The question is, what can we do about it? I have an idea, sir. Dunn hesitated. It's unorthodox, but it might work. I call it multiple amplitude distribution, MAD for short. Instead of changing our encryption, we change how we transmit. We create phantom signals that mimic convoy communications, but originate from different locations. You want to create ghost convoys? Decoys? Blackford looked skeptical. Yes, sir, but more than that. We can manipulate signal strength and transmission characteristics to make a single vessel appear as many. We could make the Mason sound like an entire convoy, or make a real convoy disappear by altering its radio fingerprint. Now, as Dunn monitored the frequencies, he was implementing that very strategy. Using carefully calculated transmission patterns, he was creating the radio signature of a large convoy where there was none, while simultaneously masking the actual communications of convoy RZ-42 with a modified signal that the Germans would likely dismiss as atmospheric interference. "Signal is active, sir," Dunn reported, as Commander Blackford returned to the radio room. U-boat direction-finding equipment should be picking up our Phantom convoy now. Blackford nodded, the weight of responsibility evident in his expression. Let's hope they take the bait. Aboard U-427, Werner was plotting an intercept course based on the radio transmissions his operator had detected. He had already communicated with two other submarines in his Wolfpack, U-352 and U-619, coordinating a classic envelopment maneuver to catch the convoy in a deadly crossfire. "Signal strength increasing, Herr Oberleutnant," Braun reported. "I estimate the convoy is moving at 12 knots on heading 270. Excellent." Werner allowed himself a small smile. After days of fruitless searching, they had their prey. "Maintain course and speed. We will achieve optimal attack position just after nightfall." What Werner couldn't know was that his U-boat was now heading away from the actual convoy RZ-42, pursuing a phantom created by James Dunn's innovative signal manipulation. Back on the Mason, Dunn continued his work, adjusting transmission patterns to maintain the illusion. The deception required constant attention. Signal strengths had to be precisely calibrated, transmission times carefully coordinated. One mistake, one inconsistency, and the Germans might realize they were being led astray. "How long can you maintain this deception?" Blackford asked. "Indefinitely, sir, as long as we keep moving to sell the illusion of a convoy. The Germans are tracking what they believe to be multiple vessels, each with distinct radio signatures. In reality, it's just us, transmitting in ways that mimic different types of ships." Blackford studied the navigation chart, where he had marked both the real convoy's position and the phantom convoy they were creating. "We're drawing them almost 60 nautical miles from RZ-42's actual route." "Yes, sir. And by the time they realize there's nothing here, the real convoy will be well beyond their patrol area." Petty Officer William Davis entered the radio room, carrying a message form. "Decoded transmission from Admiral Weston, sir. Priority Alpha." Blackford took the message, his expression remaining neutral as he read it. "It seems your theory has attracted attention at Atlantic Command, Dunn. They're requesting detailed documentation of your MAD technique for possible implementation across the fleet." Dunn's face revealed nothing, but inwardly, a complex mix of pride and vindication surged through him. For years, he had been told that his ideas weren't worth considering, that he should be grateful for the opportunity to serve at all. Now, those same ideas might help turn the tide in the Atlantic. "There's more," Blackford continued. "They're deploying additional vessels to our position to exploit this advantage. 2 destroyer escorts and a light cruiser will rendezvous with us at 0600 tomorrow. We're to continue the deception while they prepare a surprise for any U-boats that take our bait." As dawn broke the following day, the USS Mason had been joined by the USS Levy, USS Menges, and the light cruiser USS Savannah. The 4 vessels spread out in a search pattern, creating a net for the U-boats they had lured into the area. Commander Blackford gathered his officers in the wardroom, including Dunn, who had been invited despite his enlisted status, an unusual honor that reflected the critical nature of his contribution. "Gentlemen, we have confirmation that at least 3 German submarines have diverted to this area, following our Phantom convoy," Blackford explained. pointing to positions marked on the tactical chart. They expect to find merchant vessels and perhaps a small escort group. Instead, they'll find us hunting them. Lieutenant Harrison, the executive officer, studied the chart. What's the status of convoy RZ-42, sir? They've altered course as directed and are now here. Blackford indicated a position far to the northeast. Well out of danger. They should reach British waters without incident. Dunn observed the meeting quietly, aware of the sidelong glances from some of the officers. He had become accustomed to being the only black man in such settings, to the subtle shifts in body language and tone that occurred when he entered a room. What mattered now, though, wasn't race or rank, but whether his plan would work. "Petty Officer Dunn," Blackford said, turning to him, "walk us through how we'll maintain the deception now that we have multiple vessels." Dunn moved to the chart. "We'll coordinate our transmissions to maintain the illusion of a larger merchant convoy. The Mason will continue as the primary broadcaster, while the Levy and Mengies provide supplementary signals to reinforce the deception. The Savannah will maintain radio silence, keeping her presence unknown until we're ready to engage." Captain Lawrence of the Savannah, the senior officer present, nodded his approval. "And how will we transition from deception to attack?" "At your command, sir. We'll cease all deceptive transmissions simultaneously. The sudden radio silence should alert the U-boats that something is wrong, but by then it will be too late. We'll have their approximate positions from their own transmissions to their wolf pack, and they'll be caught on the surface or at periscope depth, not expecting an attack." Lawrence studied Dunn for a moment. "Impressive work, Petty Officer. Let's hope it's as effective in practice as it is in theory." As the officers dispersed to their stations, Commander Blackford held Dunn back. "You understand what's happening here, don't you, Dunn?" "Sir, if this works, it won't just save convoy RZ-42. It could change how we fight the entire Battle of the Atlantic. And it came from you, a sailor the Navy initially didn't want to put in the radio room at all." Dunn met his commander's gaze. "I'm just doing my job, sir." "No." Blackford shook his head. "You're doing far more than that. Remember this moment. Whatever happens next, remember that your idea is being implemented by captains and admirals who previously wouldn't have given you the time of day." Below the surface of the North Atlantic, Oberleutnant Werner was growing concerned. U-427 had been tracking the convoy for nearly 18 hours, yet despite the strong radio signals, they had made no visual contact. "Could they have changed course?" he asked Brown, who continued monitoring the transmissions. "Unlikely, Herr Oberleutnant. Signal patterns indicate consistent movement along the projected course. Perhaps the fog is more extensive than we estimated." Werner wasn't convinced. Something felt wrong. He had hunted enough convoys to develop an instinct for such operations, and that instinct was now sending warnings. "Send a message to U-352 and U-619. Request confirmation of signal bearings from their positions." Braun transmitted the request, and within 20 minutes both submarines had responded. The triangulation of their reports confirmed the convoy's apparent position, less than 5 nautical miles from U-427's current location. "We should have visual contact," Werner muttered. "Prepare to surface. We'll use the radar to scan the area." His executive officer looked concerned. "Surface, sir? In daylight? The fog provides cover, and we need answers. Something is not right here." As U-427 rose to periscope depth, Werner scanned the horizon through the periscope. Visibility was poor due to the fog, but he could see perhaps 2 kilometers in patches where it thinned. There was no sign of a convoy. "Raise the radar mast," he ordered. "Minimum power, short sweeps only." The radar operator reported back almost immediately. "No contacts within 5 kilometers, Herr Oberleutnant." Werner's concern deepened into alarm. "Check again. Extend range to 10 kilometers." Again, the radar showed nothing. "The radio signals," Braun began, "are false," Werner concluded. "We've been led into a trap." At that moment, aboard the USS Savannah, sonar operator Timothy Reynolds reported, "Contact submarine bearing 045, range 2000 yards, moving slowly. Signature matches Type 7 U-boat." Captain Lawrence immediately ordered, "All stop, maintain silence, signal the destroyer escorts to take positions for attack." On the Mason, Dunn received the coded message. "They've found U-427, sir," he reported to Commander Blackford. "The Savannah is tracking her. She appears to be at periscope depth, likely trying to figure out where our Phantom convoy has gone." Blackford nodded. "And the other submarines?" "U-352 is approximately 7 nautical miles south-southwest. U-619's position is still uncertain, but based on their transmissions, they're farther east, perhaps 10 miles. "So we've separated the wolf pack," Blackford observed. "They can't support each other effectively." "No, sir. And from their transmission patterns, they're confused. They're asking each other for confirmation of the convoy's position." Blackford smiled grimly. "Let's add to that confusion. Implement Phase 2. Phase 2 of Dunn's plan was even more audacious than the first. Rather than simply maintaining the Phantom convoy, the Mason would now create the impression of an Allied attack already in progress. By transmitting specific signals that mimicked depth charge explosions and combat coordination, they would suggest to the remaining U-boats that their companion was already under attack. Dunn began transmitting the new signal patterns, his hands moving across his equipment with practiced precision. Commander Blackford watched with quiet admiration. In another time, another world, James Dunn might have been a leading engineer or scientist. Instead, he had needed a world war to get the opportunity to sit at this radio desk. "Signal from the Savannah, sir," reported the Mason signalman. "They're commencing attack on U-427. Blackford nodded. "Acknowledged. Maintain our position and continue transmissions." Aboard U-427, chaos erupted as the first depth charges exploded in the water nearby. "Emergency dive," Werner ordered. "Take her down to 150 meters." The U-boat angled downward sharply, crewmen grabbing for handholds as the deck tilted beneath them. The depth charges continued to explode, the concussions slamming against the hull like massive hammers, threatening to buckle the pressure hull. "How did they find us?" the executive officer shouted over the noise. Werner had no answer. Something had gone catastrophically wrong. The convoy they had been tracking didn't exist, yet somehow Allied warships had found them instead. It made no sense, unless... The radio signals, he realized suddenly. They were false, a deception. Another depth charge exploded closer this time. Lights flickered, and a seam in the pressure hull began to weep seawater. "Damage report," Werner called. "Taking water in the aft compartment," came the response. "Depth control hydraulics damaged. We cannot maintain this depth, Herr Oberleutnant." Werner faced the most difficult decision any submarine commander could face. Remain submerged and likely sink, or surface and surrender. "Blow ballast," he ordered finally. "Surface the boat." As U-427 broke the surface, her crew scrambled to exit through the conning tower, hands raised in surrender. The USS Savannah appeared through the fog, guns trained on the stricken submarine. 5 miles away aboard U-352, Captain Lieutenant Helmut Rathke received a broken transmission from U-427. The message was incomplete, but its meaning was clear. They had been attacked and forced to surrender. "It's a trap," Rathke told his officers. "There is no convoy. Somehow the Americans have lured us here." "What are your orders, Herr Kapitänleutnant?" his executive officer asked. Rathke considered their options. They could attempt to rescue U-427's crew, a nearly impossible task with American warships present. They could attack the American vessels, equally suicidal given the circumstances, or they could retreat, preserve their boat, and report what had happened. "Send a final message to U-619, he decided. "Warn them to withdraw immediately, then take us deep and silent. We're leaving the area." U-352 transmitted the warning, then dove to 200 meters, shutting down all non-essential systems to minimize noise. They would run silent for at least 24 hours before attempting to return to their patrol area. But their warning transmission had been detected. Aboard the USS Mason, Dunn reported, "Sir, I've intercepted a transmission from what appears to be U-352 to U-619. They're warning of a trap and advising withdrawal." Commander Blackford immediately relayed this to the other American vessels. The USS Levy and USS Menges altered course to intercept U-352's last known position, while the Savannah secured U-427 and her surviving crew. For the next 6 hours, the American vessels hunted the remaining U-boats. U-619 managed to escape, slipping away to the east, but U-352 was not so fortunate. Detected by the Menger's sonar, she was subjected to a precision depth charge attack that forced her to surface. Like U-427 before her, her crew abandoned ship and were taken prisoner. As night fell, Commander Blackford received a transmission from Atlantic Command. Convoy RZ-42 has reached British waters safely. All vessels and personnel accounted for. Commendations to all involved in Operation Phantom Signal. In the radio room, Dunn continued monitoring frequencies, alert for any sign of additional U-boats that might have joined the hunt. But the seas had gone quiet. The immediate danger had passed. "You should get some rest," Blackford told him, entering the radio room. "You've been at that desk for nearly 30 hours straight." "I'm fine, sir," Dunn replied, though exhaustion was evident in his voice. "That's an order, Petty Officer. Simmons will relieve you. Get 6 hours sleep, then report back." Dunn nodded, standing stiffly. As he prepared to leave, Blackford added, "You've done something remarkable here, Dunn. I've recommended you for commendation." "Thank you, sir, but it was a team effort." "The team implemented your idea," Blackford countered. "Don't diminish what you've accomplished." As Dunn made his way to his bunk, he passed through compartments filled with his shipmates. Some nodded in acknowledgement, others offered quiet congratulations. Word of what had happened, of his role in it, had spread throughout the ship. In his small berth, before exhaustion claimed him, Dunn wrote in his journal, "Today I proved what I've always known, that given the chance I could contribute something worthwhile. Perhaps this war, terrible as it is, will open doors that have always been closed to people who look like me." Aboard the captured U-427, American naval intelligence officers were debriefing the German crew. Most were sullen, offering only their name, rank, and service number as required by the Geneva Convention. But Funkmaat Heinrich Braun, the radio operator, was more cooperative. "How were we detected?" he asked his American counterpart. "We maintained proper protocols. Our transmissions were minimized and encrypted." Lieutenant Phillips, the intelligence officer conducting the interview, considered how much to reveal. "Let's just say you were following a ghost, Braun. There was no convoy where you were looking." Braun's expression shifted from confusion to understanding. "The transmissions we detected, they were fake, deliberate deceptions." Phillips merely smiled. "We'll be processing you and your crewmates for transfer to a POW facility in the United States. I suggest you cooperate fully. This war is going poorly for Germany, as you must know." "Who created this deception?" Braun persisted. "It was impressive, technically sophisticated." Phillips studied the German radio man. "Would it surprise you to learn that the architect of your capture was a Negro sailor, a man your Führer's ideology would classify as Untermenschen?" Braun's face registered genuine shock. "That's not possible." "Not only possible, but fact. Perhaps something to think about during your time as our guest." The news of the successful operation spread quickly through the Allied Naval Command. Within days, James Dunn found himself summoned to a meeting aboard the USS Augusta, the flagship of the Atlantic Fleet, which had rendezvoused with the Masons specifically for this purpose. Admiral Jonas Ingram, commander of the Atlantic Fleet, studied the young radioman standing at attention before him. "At ease, Petty Officer Dunn. I've read Commander Blackford's report on Operation Phantom Signal. Impressive work." "Thank you, sir. I understand you developed this signal deception technique independently, based on your observations of German detection patterns." "Yes, sir. I noticed consistencies in enemy response to our transmission protocols that suggested they were tracking the patterns rather than decoding content." Ingram exchanged glances with the other officers present. "And you called this technique multiple amplitude distribution, MAD?" "Yes, sir. It involves manipulating transmission characteristics to create false impressions of vessel types and numbers." "Can it be taught to other radio operators, implemented fleet-wide?" Dunn nodded. "I've prepared documentation of the methodology, sir. With proper training, any qualified radio operator could implement the basic technique. Further refinements would depend on the specific tactical situation." Ingram picked up a folder from his desk. "I'm authorizing immediate implementation across the Atlantic Fleet. You'll be temporarily reassigned to Atlantic Command to assist in developing a training program. Additionally, This technique will be shared with our British allies for use in their convoy operations." "I'm honored, sir," Dunn replied, maintaining his composure despite his surprise. "There's more," Ingram continued. "Based on the success of this operation and your exemplary service record, I'm recommending your advancement to Chief Petty Officer and considering you for Officer Candidate School." This time Dunn couldn't hide his shock. "Sir, Thank you, sir." "Don't thank me, Dunn. You've earned this through merit and innovation. The Navy needs thinking like yours." Ingram's expression became more serious. "I won't pretend it will be easy. There will be those who resent your advancement, who believe you haven't earned it or don't deserve it because of your race. Prove them wrong, as you've already begun to do." "I understand, sir. I won't let you down." As Dunn departed the Admiral's quarters, he found Commander Blackford waiting for him. "How did it go?" Blackford asked. "The Admiral is implementing MAD across the fleet. I'm being temporarily reassigned to help develop training. And—" Dunn hesitated, still processing the news. "He's recommending me for advancement to Chief and considering me for OCS." Blackford smiled. "Congratulations, well deserved." "Sir, may I speak frankly?" "Of course." "Why did you support my idea? Many officers would have dismissed it, especially coming from someone like me." Blackford considered the question. "When I was a junior officer, I served under a commander who believed that good ideas can come from anywhere, that rank and background don't determine who might have the solution to a problem. He taught me to listen more than I speak. When you presented your observation and theory, it was sound. That's all that mattered." As they walked along the deck of the Augusta, Blackford added, "The Navy is changing, Dunn. Too slowly for many, including me, but it is changing. This war has forced us to confront our prejudices, to recognize talent wherever it exists. Men like you are helping to drive that change." By August 1943, James Dunn's MAD technique had been implemented across the Allied navies, becoming a standard component of convoy defense strategy. U-boat effectiveness, already declining due to improved Allied tactics and technology, dropped further as the Germans found themselves increasingly unable to locate convoys through radio direction finding. In Berlin, Admiral Karl Dönitz, commander of the Kriegsmarine, faced the frustration of his submarine commanders during a strategy meeting. "Our boats are reporting ghost convoys, phantom signals that lead nowhere," reported Kapitan zur See Werner Hartenstein. When they investigate, they find American hunter-killer groups waiting for them instead. 3 more boats lost last week alone. "How are they creating these deceptions?" Dönitz demanded. "Our signal analysis section believes they are manipulating transmission characteristics," Hartenstein explained, "creating the impression of multiple vessels where there are few or none, while masking the actual transmissions of real convoys. Can we develop countermeasures? We're working on more sophisticated direction-finding equipment, but it will take time. Meanwhile, our operational effectiveness continues to decline." Dönitz studied the maps showing the steady increase in Allied shipping reaching Britain and the corresponding increase in U-boat losses. The Battle of the Atlantic was slipping away from Germany, and with it perhaps the war itself. "Who developed this technique?" he asked finally. "British intelligence? American?" Hartenstein hesitated. According to interrogations of captured personnel from U-427, the Americans credit the innovation to a Negro radio man serving aboard a destroyer escort. Our sources have identified him as one James Dunn. "A Negro?" Dönitz's disbelief was evident. "That's not possible. This is sophisticated signals manipulation." "Nevertheless, that is what our intelligence indicates." Dönitz dismissed the report with a wave of his hand. "Propaganda, clearly. The Americans would not entrust such important work to a Negro. Find the actual source of this technique and develop countermeasures immediately." The German failure to take the threat seriously, to acknowledge that their adversary might utilize talent regardless of race, gave the Allies additional months of advantage in the Atlantic. By the time German intelligence finally confirmed Dunn's role and began developing effective countermeasures, the strategic balance had shifted decisively. For James Dunn, the remainder of 1943 brought both professional advancement and personal challenges. Promoted to Chief Petty Officer as Admiral Ingram had promised, he spent 3 months at Atlantic Command, helping to train radio operators in his MAD technique before returning to the USS Mason. His return to the ship brought a hero's welcome from most of the crew, but not all. Some of the white petty officers, particularly those who had been in service longer than Dunn, resented his rapid advancement and growing reputation. "Don't let it bother you," advised machinist's mate First Class Samuel Jackson, one of the other black petty officers aboard. "They're just sore because you've proven what they don't want to admit, that we're every bit as capable as they are." "I didn't do this to prove anything about race," Dunn replied as they shared coffee in the mess. "I did it because it needed doing, because it could save lives." "That's why it matters even more," Jackson said. "You weren't trying to make a point. You were just doing your job better than anyone expected. That's the kind of thing that changes minds." In February 1944, Dunn received orders to report to Officer Candidate School in Newport, Rhode Island. If successful, he would become one of the first black commissioned officers in the U.S. Navy, joining a very small group of pioneers. The night before his departure from the Mason, Commander Blackford called him to his cabin. "I wanted to wish you luck, Dunn," he said, offering his hand. "OCS won't be easy. Some of your classmates won't accept you, and some of the instructors will be looking for any excuse to fail you, but you've faced worse and succeeded. Thank you, sir, for everything. I have something for you." Blackford handed him a small box. Inside was a fountain pen, a Parker 51 with a polished black barrel and gold trim. "Sir, I can't accept this. It's too valuable." "You can and you will," Blackford insisted. "Consider it an investment in the future of the Navy. Use it to write orders that will save lives, just as your ideas have already done." Dunn's journey through Officer Candidate School was as challenging as Blackford had predicted. Of the 241 candidates in his class, he was one of only 2 black men. While some of his classmates treated him with respect or at least professional courtesy, others made their resentment clear through slights both subtle and overt. The academic aspects of the program presented less difficulty. Dunn's technical knowledge and practical experience gave him advantages in many courses, and his disciplined study habits served him well in others. By the midpoint of the 12-week program, he had established himself in the upper quarter of the class academically. The leadership assessments proved more challenging, not because Dunn lacked ability, but because some evaluators seemed to apply stricter standards to him than to other candidates. In one notable exercise, he successfully led his team through a complex problem-solving scenario, only to receive criticism for being too assertive and not sufficiently mindful of team dynamics, criticisms not leveled at white candidates who had employed similar leadership styles. "You know what this is," said Ensign Richardson, the other black candidate, during one of their rare moments of privacy. "They'll pass us if we're exceptional, but only if we're also unthreatening. Walk the line." "Dunn, I'm not here to be unthreatening," Dunn replied. "I'm here to become the best officer I can be." "And you will," Richardson assured him. "Just be smart about which battles to fight." In May 1944, as Allied forces prepared for the invasion of Normandy, James Dunn graduated from Officer Candidate School, commissioned as an ensign in the United States Navy. The ceremony was a subdued affair due to wartime restrictions, but for Dunn, it represented the culmination of a journey that had once seemed impossible. His first assignment as a commissioned officer took him not back to sea, but to the Naval Research Laboratory in Washington, D.C., where his expertise in radio deception techniques was needed for a new project: countermeasures against German radio-controlled weapons. The contrast between his previous accommodations aboard ship and his new situation was stark. As an officer, he had private quarters and access to the officers' club. Yet in Washington, he encountered segregation more rigid than anything in the Navy. Despite his uniform and rank, he was refused service in restaurants, directed to colored seating sections on public transportation, and subjected to daily indignities that his white colleagues never experienced. "How do you tolerate it?" asked Lieutenant Sarah Coopersmith, a wave officer who worked with him on the countermeasures project. Coopersmith, a mathematician from Philadelphia, was one of the few who treated him as an equal without reservation. "By remembering what I'm fighting for," Dunn replied. "Not just victory in this war, but the promise of what America could become afterward." Their work involved developing jammers for the radio guidance systems used in German glide bombs and other precision weapons. Dunn's understanding of signal characteristics proved invaluable, allowing the team to create more effective countermeasures with limited power requirements, essential for installation on vessels with constrained electrical systems. In September 1944, Dunn received unexpected orders. He was being sent to England to join a special Anglo-American technical intelligence unit focused on German communications systems. His experience with both operational radio interception and signal manipulation made him uniquely qualified for the assignment. The unit, designated Joint Communications Technical Intelligence Group, JCTIG, operated from a requisitioned manor house in Buckinghamshire, not far from Bletchley Park, where Allied codebreakers worked to decipher German Enigma transmissions. While JCTIG's work complemented the code-breaking efforts, it focused more on the technical aspects of transmission and interception, the hardware and methodology, rather than the encrypted content. Upon his arrival, Dunn was met by Royal Navy Commander Geoffrey Harrington, the unit's senior British officer. "Ensign Dunn," Harrington greeted him warmly, "welcome to Thornfield Hall. Your reputation precedes you." "Thank you, sir," Dunn replied, somewhat taken aback by the reception. "No need for surprise," Harrington said with a smile. "Your mad technique has saved countless lives and ships. We've implemented it across our convoy system with excellent results. Now we hope you'll help us take the next step." That next step, as Dunn soon learned, involved not just deceiving the Germans, but actively manipulating their command and control systems. By precisely mimicking German transmission patterns and protocols, JCTIG hoped to insert false orders into the U-boat command network, creating confusion and potentially luring submarines into traps or away from actual targets. The work was complex and dangerous. If the Germans detected the deception, they would immediately change their protocols, eliminating the advantage. Moreover, any false transmissions had to be perfectly consistent with what the Germans would expect, in terms of not just encryption, handled by specialists at Bletchley Park, but signal characteristics, timing, and operational context. Dunn worked closely with a team that included British signals experts, German linguists, naval tactical specialists, and engineers. His role focused on ensuring that the technical aspects of the transmissions would withstand German scrutiny. "The challenge," he explained during one planning session, "is that the Germans are excellent signals technicians. They'll notice even small inconsistencies in how a message is transmitted regardless of its content. We need to recreate not just the protocol, but the individual characteristics of specific German operators." "Like a handwriting forgery," suggested Flight Lieutenant Alice Mercer, an RAF signals specialist. "Precisely," Dunn agreed. "Each operator has their own fist, subtle patterns in how they key a message. We need to replicate those patterns exactly." The team spent weeks analyzing intercepted German transmissions, identifying individual operators, and cataloging their characteristics. They developed a library of operator profiles that could be used to authenticate false transmissions. In December 1944, JCTIG was ready to implement its first major deception operation, codenamed Doppelganger. The target was a group of U-boats operating in the Bay of Biscay, positioned to intercept Allied supply convoys supporting the campaign in France. Using their carefully crafted forgeries, JCTIG transmitted orders appearing to come from U-boat headquarters, directing the submarines to a different patrol area based on false intelligence about an especially valuable convoy. In reality, the new patrol area was heavily monitored by Allied aircraft equipped with improved radar that could detect submarines even when they were surfaced only briefly to receive transmissions. The operation proved devastatingly effective. 4 U-boats were sunk within 48 hours, having been lured into the deadly trap by orders they believed genuine. More importantly, the Germans did not immediately realize they had been deceived, attributing the losses to improved Allied air patrols rather than compromised communications. For Dunn, the success was bittersweet. While he understood the necessity of the deception and its value in saving Allied lives, He was acutely aware that they had directly caused the deaths of dozens of German submariners, men not unlike those he had helped capture rather than kill in his original mad operation. "Troubled?" asked Commander Harrington. Finding Dunn alone in the Manor's library late one evening after news of the operation's success had reached them. "Just thinking about the cost," Dunn admitted. "The men on those boats." Harrington nodded, taking a seat across from him. "It's proper to think of them. Necessary, even. The moment we stop counting the cost is the moment we lose something essential. Does it get easier? Making these decisions?" "It shouldn't," Harrington said simply. "The day it becomes easy to send men to their deaths is the day you should no longer have that authority." He paused, studying Dunn thoughtfully. "You know, when they told me an American ensign would be joining us, a Negro ensign at that, I had my doubts. Not about your capabilities, but about whether you'd fit within our rather eccentric little community here." Dunn waited, uncertain where the conversation was heading. "I was wrong to doubt," Harrington continued. "You've not only fit in, but elevated our work considerably. I've recommended to both our commands that you receive a commendation for your contributions to Doppelganger." "That's not necessary, sir." "Perhaps not, but it is deserved." Harrington rose to leave, then added, "This war will end, Dunn. Sooner rather than later, God willing. Have you given thought to what comes after?" "Some, sir. I'd like to continue in communications research, if possible. With your skills, you could write your own ticket in the private sector. RCA, Western Electric, they'd snap you up in an instant." "Perhaps. But I believe I can do more important work in the Navy, sir. At least for now." Harrington nodded. "Good man. The service needs officers like you, especially now. The world is changing. The technologies we're developing for war will transform civilian life afterward. Those who understand them will shape that transformation." As 1944 gave way to 1945, the tide of war turned decisively against Germany. Allied forces advanced from both east and west, squeezing the Third Reich into an ever-shrinking territory. At sea, the once feared U-boat fleet had been reduced to a shadow of its former self, with new boats being sunk almost as quickly as they could be commissioned. In February 1945, Dunn received orders to return to Washington, where his expertise was needed for the final stages of a new radio guidance system for precision bombing. Before his departure, he was awarded the British Distinguished Service Cross for his contributions to Allied signals intelligence operations, an extraordinary honor for an American officer of any race. The citation, personally approved by Admiral Sir Andrew Cunningham, First Sea Lord of the Royal Navy, read in part, "For exceptional service in the development and implementation of advanced signals deception techniques that have saved countless Allied lives and materially contributed to victory at sea." Upon his return to the Naval Research Laboratory, Dunn found both the facility and the capital transformed by the approaching end of the war. There was an air of cautious optimism, tempered by the knowledge that difficult fighting still lay ahead, particularly in the Pacific. His new assignment involved adapting radar and radio guidance systems for potential use in the planned invasion of Japan, an operation that military planners expected to be far more costly than the Normandy landings had been. Dunn threw himself into the work, aware that every improvement in precision could save both American and Japanese lives if the invasion proved necessary. When Germany surrendered on May 8, 1945, Dunn celebrated quietly with his colleagues at the laboratory. There was relief, but little jubilation. Too many had died and the war against Japan continued. It was during this period that Dunn reconnected with Lieutenant Sarah Coopersmith, who had been reassigned to a related project at the laboratory. Their professional collaboration gradually evolved into friendship, despite the social barriers that made such relationships difficult in 1940s America. "What will you do after the war?" she asked him one evening as they worked late, finalizing calculations for a guidance system component. "Continue in the Navy if they'll have me," he replied, "though I expect there will be fewer opportunities for advancement in peacetime." Coopersmith regarded him thoughtfully. "You could do so much more outside the service, research, development, even teaching at a university. You have the mind for it." "And the color for it?" Dunn asked with a sardonic smile. "Times are changing," Kaishi insisted. "This war has shifted many boundaries. The technologies we've developed, radar, sonar, advanced radio systems, even these primitive computing machines, they'll need minds like yours to develop them further. Perhaps, but change comes slowly, especially when it comes to race in America. Then be part of accelerating that change, Coopersmith urged. Don't let them push you aside once the crisis has passed. The conversation stayed with Dunn in the weeks that followed. He had never seen himself as an activist or a pioneer, simply a man doing his job to the best of his ability. Yet he had already helped break barriers within the Navy. Perhaps there were other barriers he could challenge. When news came of the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, followed by Japan's surrender, Dunn experienced the same mix of emotions as many Americans: relief that the war was over, horror at the destructive power unleashed, and uncertainty about what would follow. In October 1945, with demobilization accelerating, Dunn received orders that surprised him. He was being promoted to lieutenant junior grade and assigned to the Navy's Advanced Research Projects Division, a new unit focused on transitioning wartime technologies to peacetime applications while maintaining America's technical edge in the uncertain post-war world. The promotion came with a personal note from Admiral Jonas Ingram, who had first recognized Dunn's potential back in 1943. Your continued service represents not just your personal achievement, but a step toward the Navy we must become if America is to lead in the century ahead. I have followed your career with interest and pride. Well done, Lieutenant. As the immediate post-war period gave way to the emerging Cold War, Dunn found both new opportunities and persistent challenges. His technical abilities continued to earn recognition, but social and institutional barriers remained formidable. He was often the only black officer in meetings or at official functions, constantly navigating the complex racial dynamics of mid-century America. In 1947, Dunn made a decision that would shape the remainder of his career. Offered a position with RCA at nearly twice his Navy salary, he instead chose to remain in uniform, accepting an assignment to the newly established Office of Naval Research, ONR, where he would help direct research in communications technology. "Why stay?" asked Captain Lawrence Blackford, his former commander from the USS Mason, now serving at the Pentagon, when they met at a naval technology conference in Philadelphia. "Because there's work that needs doing," Dunn replied simply, "and because every door I walk through makes it easier for the next man who looks like me to walk through it too." Blackford nodded, understanding. "The Navy still needs you, James, more than ever perhaps. The Soviets are advancing quickly in radio technology, and the challenges ahead will require the best minds we have." By 1950, Lieutenant Commander James Dunn was leading an ONR team developing satellite communication concepts, technology that wouldn't be fully realized until the launch of Sputnik shocked America into the space age 7 years later. His work on signal propagation in the upper atmosphere and early concepts for frequency-hopping transmission systems laid groundwork for technologies that would eventually revolutionize global communications. Throughout these years, he maintained contact with some of his former shipmates from the USS Mason, particularly during the annual reunions that began in the late 1940s. Many had gone on to successful careers in various fields, their wartime service having opened doors previously closed to black Americans. In 1954, a decade after his innovative MAD technique had helped turn the tide in the Battle of the Atlantic, Dunn was invited to address the Naval War College on the topic of technological innovation in warfare. His presentation emphasized not just the technical aspects, but the human factors that either facilitated or hindered such innovation. "The most sophisticated technology is worthless without the human insight to apply it effectively," he told the assembled officers and instructors. "And that insight can come from anywhere, from admirals or ensigns, from career officers or draftees, from any background or heritage. The greatest danger in warfare is not the enemy's capabilities, but our own failure to recognize and utilize all the talent available to us." The speech was well received, though some of the older officers present were visibly uncomfortable with its implications. Afterward, Dunn was approached by a German naval attaché in Newport as part of a NATO delegation. "Commander Dunn," the German officer said, extending his hand, "Kapitän zur See Heinrich Braun. We have met before, though under different circumstances." Dunn studied the man's face, recognition dawning. Funkmatt Brown, from U-427. The same, though much has changed since then, Braun acknowledged. I wanted to tell you that your deception was brilliantly executed. It took our analysts months to understand what you had done, by which time it was too late to counter effectively. Thank you, Dunn replied, uncertain how to respond to praise from a former enemy. I have followed your career with interest, Braun continued. When I learned you would be speaking here, I arranged to attend. What you said about recognizing talent regardless of its source, this is a lesson Germany learned too late and at terrible cost. A lesson many still resist, Dunn observed. Indeed, but some of us remember. Braun hesitated, then added, I have often thought about what you achieved aboard the Mason. It helped me understand how profoundly wrong our ideology had been. For that insight, I owe you a personal debt beyond our professional interaction. In the years that followed, Commander Dunn continued to advance both in rank and responsibility. By the time he retired from active duty in 1968 as a captain, he had served in key roles at the Naval Research Laboratory, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, DARPA, and NATO's Technical Coordination Office. His retirement from the Navy did not end his contributions to communications technology. As a consultant to both government agencies and private industry, he helped develop systems that would eventually evolve into components of the modern Internet and mobile communications infrastructure. In 1996, at the age of 77, James Dunn attended the commissioning of the USS Mason DDG-87, an Arleigh Burke-class destroyer, named in honor of the original Mason and her pioneering crew. As one of the few surviving crew members from the World War II vessel, he was invited to give remarks at the ceremony. When I joined the Navy in 1942, he told the audience, which included senior naval officers, government officials, and the diverse crew of the new Mason, many doubted whether black sailors could effectively serve at sea, let alone contribute to technical aspects of naval warfare. The original Mason and her crew disproved those doubts through dedicated service and innovation. Looking out at the assembled crew of the new vessel, representing the full spectrum of America's diversity, he continued, What you see today, a Navy that strives to recognize talent and capability regardless of race, gender, or background, didn't happen by accident or overnight. It happened because individuals throughout our history refused to accept artificial limitations, and because wise leaders recognized that America's strength lies in utilizing all of our talents. After the ceremony, a young ensign approached him, introducing herself as Ensign Jasmine Williams, one of the new Mason's communications officers. Sir, I read about your MAD technique in my signal intelligence course at the Academy, she said. They still teach it as a case study in innovative thinking. I never expected to meet the man who created it. Dunn smiled. The technology has changed beyond recognition since then. I doubt my old techniques would work with today's systems. It's not about the specific technique, sir, Williams replied. It's about the approach, seeing patterns others miss, questioning assumptions, finding unconventional solutions. That never becomes obsolete. Well said, Ensign. The tools change, but the thinking remains the same. Dunn looked past her to the sleek modern destroyer bearing the name of his old ship. When I served on the original Mason, I never imagined I'd see a day when someone like you would be serving as an officer on a vessel like that. Each generation opens doors for the next. And we haven't forgotten who opened them, Captain, Williams assured him. Your generation laid the foundation we're building on. In his final years, James Dunn participated in several oral history projects documenting both the technical innovations of World War II and the experiences of black service members. His story of how one radioman's insight helped turn the tide in the Battle of the Atlantic became part of naval history, taught to new generations of communications specialists and intelligence officers. He remained modest about his achievements, often deflecting personal praise to emphasize the contributions of his shipmates and colleagues. I was in the right place at the right time with the right idea, he would say. Many others could have done what I did if given the chance. The real achievement of my generation was helping to ensure that more people would get that chance in the future. When Captain James Henry Dunn passed away in 2003 at the age of 84, his funeral at Arlington National Cemetery was attended by naval officers of all ranks, including several admirals. Among them was Admiral Michael Reynolds, Chief of Naval Operations, who had been a junior officer when he first heard Dunn speak at the Naval War College in the 1980s. Captain Dunn's legacy extends far beyond his technical innovations, Reynolds said in his eulogy. He showed us that excellence knows no color, that innovation can come from unexpected sources, and that our strength as a navy and as a nation lies in recognizing the potential in all our people. The citation accompanying Dunn's posthumous award of the Navy Distinguished Service Medal summarized his contribution. Through technical brilliance and moral courage, Captain Dunn not only saved countless lives during the Battle of the Atlantic, but helped transform the United States Navy into an institution that increasingly values talent and character above all other considerations. Today, visitors to the National Museum of the United States Navy in Washington, D.C., can see a display dedicated to the USS Mason and her crew, featuring the multiple amplitude distribution technique that James Dunn developed to deceive German U-boats. The accompanying text explains how this innovation helped protect vital convoys and contributed to Allied victory. But perhaps the most fitting tribute came in 2010, when the Naval Communications Command established the annual Dunn Award for Innovation in Naval Communications, presented to service members who develop new approaches to communications challenges. The award citation includes these words: "In the spirit of Captain James H. Dunn, whose innovative thinking saved lives and helped secure victory in World War II, this award recognizes those who see beyond conventional limitations to create new possibilities in naval communications." The story of James Dunn and the mad signal deception reminds us that history often turns on innovations that never make headlines, technical insights and adaptations that change the course of events without fanfare. It also reminds us that talent and capability exist in all communities, and that nations and institutions are strongest when they recognize and utilize that talent without artificial barriers. In the vast narrative of World War II, with its epic battles and world-changing technologies, the tale of one radio operator's insight might seem small. Yet in that seemingly small story lies a larger truth, that human ingenuity, when given the opportunity to flourish, can overcome even the most formidable challenges. James Dunn's innovation not only deceived the German Navy, but helped crack open doors of opportunity that had long been closed, demonstrating that the true measure of individuals lies not in their appearance or background, but in their capabilities and character. And that concludes our story. If you made it this far, please share your thoughts in the comments. What part of this historical account surprised you most? Don't forget to subscribe for more untold stories from World War II, and check out the video on screen for another incredible tale from history. Until next time.